And since I see we've got over half, about 27 people signed on here, I'm just going to do a brief little welcome and turn it over to our guest speakers because it is after 7. So I'm Anne, the Adult Services Librarian at the McFarland Public Library. I want to thank the UW Center for East Asian Studies for their grant support of this program tonight. And thank you so much to Madeline and Nyima for being here tonight. And I'll turn it over to them. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Anne. And it is such a great pleasure to be on the Winter Community Read. Nyima, Gyaltse, and I are very honored to be talking with you tonight. You're in for something very, very special. Nyima, do you want to just say hello briefly so they can hear your voice, and then we'll go on?
Yeah. So Tashi Deleg in Tibetan, which means auspicious blessing. Actually, the deeper meaning of the Tashi Deleg, may you reach on the path of liberation, but simply you can mean that auspicious blessing. You can say in the morning, afternoon, or evening. So Tashi Deleg, everybody.
Oh, Tashi Deleg. Everyone, yes, try that one. I'm going to have my sister Susan peek in the screen here just to say hi because she's in half of the book and she's here. And Nyima, your wife Tenzin Namdala, is she anywhere around? Would she like to peek in, or your kids?
All right. Namda.
While he's leaning over, you see his beautiful Tibetan altar, which is all ready for Tibetan New Year here, and he'll tell us more about that later.
Yep. Namdullah, just say hello here. Oh, she's.
she'll come in a little bit.
Yeah, she's yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And then we'll start, and we just want to thank everyone so much for coming. Okay, share screen. Everyone can see a screen there? Okay, so here we are, and I just want to thank everyone who's here tonight, especially those of you who read the book as part of the McFarland Library, and all my friends and family and cousins and sisters and Peace Corps volunteers who are stopped by today, and of course my Tibetan family. I don't know whether Ladun, who is, let's see if I can, Ladun is right here in Madison, and she is, can you see this? That's, can you see that pointer? That's Ladun. You might see her in the audience. So what we wanted to do today was I'm going to talk a little bit and tell the story of the story and to show some pictures. And then very special, since we have Nyima with us, I will introduce Nyima, and he will talk a little bit and tell his story. And then we have time for all of you to ask some questions. If you would, because this is more of a, I think, a webinar than a Zoom that you might be familiar with, if you'll type your questions in the chat, then Anne will help us answer them shortly. And we will go on from that. Okay, can everyone see the screen okay? Just write in the chat to Anne if you can't, because we're used to seeing people. But do you want to say this again, Nyima, just so people can hear it as we see it written, the greeting?
Tashi Deleg.
Yeah, so you can try that again, Tashi Deleg. You can just barely hear the K, and as he said, it means auspicious blessings. So in the writing of this book, To Make a Life, people always like to know why did I write this book, or how did it start? And so where I started as a writer and an author was really from my love of dance and music at Folklore Village in Dodgeville, where I know some of you from, as a tremendous influence on me. And then through my job at work and my own adventures, and finally my late in life Peace Corps duty in Lesotho in Southern Africa, I accumulated by chance and design a large number of countries. And when I came back from one of my more recent times away, I was gone about 7 years at a time, someone asked me, of all the 64 countries you've been, what's your favorite? And I would answer Tibet, which is a ridiculous answer because Tibet is one country I've always dreamed of going. I've wanted to go. I wanted to go with this family that I met, but I have never been able to go. And they cannot go because visas are not extended from the Chinese embassy to Tibetan refugees, except in rarer cases. So 25 years ago, I really didn't know very much about Tibet. Maybe around Madison, Wisconsin, I'd seen some of these Save Tibet signs or the beautiful Tibetan flags flowing from trees, or I'd been to Brad Pitt movies and 7 years in Tibet. But like most people, I didn't know an awful lot about Tibet. But then I met this one woman, and it was I was in my office working late, like women tend to do. And after hours, the cleaning crew would come in. And there was this one wonderful woman that I met who is the beginning of this story. And her name is Tenzin Kelsang. And she is working tonight in a cleaning job. So in a way, one way, she was a very ordinary person. And in another way, she and her family completely changed my life. And I think I wrote this book because I wanted people to know that you don't have to travel around the world to have remarkable adventures, that the remarkable adventures are right in your very town, maybe in your very block. And I just wanted to promote the idea of everyone reaching out and finding those special people that change your life just by being themselves. So why did I write this story? I mean, I'm not Tibetan, I'm not a refugee, I'm not a Buddhist. Now I'm reading from the book. I'm not one of Tenzin's children. The family spoke Tibetan at home, but despite my attempt to study the language, I couldn't hear the 4 tones and even the very first letters of the alphabet. Ha, 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 ga. I'm a white woman of middle-class privilege, and they are people of color tossed onto the bottom rungs of the United States economy. However, in small daily ways, this family challenged the stark angularity of my Anglo-European perspectives and helped me understand the world in ways that were gentler and far more forgiving and more comforting. However they arrive, asylum seekers, immigrants, and refugees reach out with outstretched hands toward safer, more promising shores. And welcoming these wayfarers rekindles our humanity and heals our broken parts. Only within the cords that bind us together do we find answers to age-old questions about despair and enmity, fear and alienation, justice and hope. Oh, that's a little piece from the book. And I didn't know this 25 years ago, but just to give a brief geography lesson, you almost can't find this map because it's a map of what was before China invaded Tibet and before thousands of Tibetans fled and became refugees, not only in India, but all over the world. But you can see how big it is. And as China was growing, it needed the land, it needed the water, it needed the minerals. And today, there are more ethnic Han Chinese people in Tibet than there are ethnic Tibetans. And Tibet does not even go under the name of Tibet. It is incorporated as a province, Xizang province, into China, so you won't find a map like this. However, if you look at the geography around, you see so much of the culture of the languages, the foods, the costumes, the customs, the religions that were Tibet. And when the Chinese army did invade in the 1950s, and then especially in 1959, and people fled, and monasteries were destroyed, and monks were imprisoned, or worse, and activists were imprisoned or worse. Then they fled over the Himalayas. Just unbelievable that there are these Himalayas along the border with Nepal and Bhutan and India, and in 1 year, even 80,000 fled across even in the winter. It's just an unbelievable escape, and of course many did not survive. Especially some of the older ones started out to escape, but then were curled up on a rock at the beginning of the mountain. And there were remarkable stories that many Tibetan people have in their family. I want you to remember this photo. This was not an old photo from the 1950s. It's a modern photo, but this is a photo that could have been taken from Nyima's life. So when he talks about his story, then he'll refer back to this story of coming over the Himalayas, where there were sharpshooters, the Chinese army, and many dangers. But even after the masses of adults fled, there was a trickle of parents who wanted to bring their children into India because there they could study the Tibetan language, since it was no longer taught in schools in China, and Tibetan culture could be celebrated. And of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had set up a government in exile in eventually Dharamsala in northern India. So one of the most remarkable refugee resettlement stories in our time is the one from Tibet into India. And President Nehru, and at that time, whoops, let me go backwards. I was trying to find a laser and I'm just going frontwards. Looking for that laser. Okay, you get good at it if you do it often enough. The Himalayas are all along this border. And now there are 70 communities, distinct refugee communities, but the President Nasser and the very young Dalai Lama set up the idea of these communities. The land was very tropical. There were tigers, there were elephants in the south, where my friend Tenzin Kelsang was actually born. Like many refugees of many countries, they've never actually been to the country that their parents or grandparents fled from. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in the northern part of in India, in Dharamsala. And throughout here, especially along the border, are these remarkable refugee settlements, which are now, what, 60 years old, 70 years old. And are flourishing, and many of them have become more wealthy than the surrounding communities. A lot of the stories in this book came from one of my favorite people in the world, Mi'kmaq Dorji. You say Mi'kmaq Dorji La when you want to add respect, just like in Japanese, when someone calls you Nyima-san, then I can call Nyima Nyima La. But he is one of the elders now, and here there are the Tibetan elders who grew up in Tibet and knew a way of life that has disappeared. They are all over in 20, 30 communities in the United States and in Canada and England and in Switzerland, Sweden, and many countries. And so his stories are powerful, and the oral histories that are being done of these elders are invaluable. Well, it was 5 years before the family was able to come on a family reunification visa. And during those 5 years, I can't say that I was a great friend of Tenzin Kelsang. You know, she's one of your acquaintances, and we did a few things together. But when the family came, then it was really, I'm a woman without kids of my own, and suddenly here were these 4 charming kids. This is Tardo, the youngest, Tamdin, Namgyal, and on this particular day, Ladun was being not a Tibetan, but more like a teen, and just didn't want to be in the picture. And we're in Milwaukee in one of the domes. That's why it looks so tropical. But the family came, and the reason I became so involved with these 4 wonderful, delightful, curious, very respectful young middle school kids was because the families did what immigrant families do. And Tenzin worked a morning job, she worked an evening job, and she worked on weekends. And these jobs are dangerous. I was surprised at all the chemicals that she used, and also very lonely. And she was a weaver before and a farmer, and Mi'kmaq was a farmer and a soldier, and he had a morning job and an afternoon job, which left 4 kids at home. They were just so much fun. So if I read again from the book a little bit, my Tibetan family and I fluctuated between being insiders and outsiders within one another's communities. Either I was an outsider at Tibetan American events, or the children and their parents were outsiders at the casual university or folklore village events to which I took them. At family gatherings and big events, my Tibetan family and other Tibetan families continued speaking in Tibetan when I sat down beside them. I'll skip a little here. One day, 2 years after their arrival, Ladun asked me, "How do you make friends with white people?" She was in the 10th grade, and I pictured her in the cavernous halls of the high school and answered her question with another. "Well, what do you do between classes?" "I talk with my friends," she said. And I imagined a group of Tibetan American teens congregated together and laughing. "What language do you speak with them?" I asked, already suspecting one problem. "In Tibetan," she confirmed. So at least part of the solution seemed obvious to me. Try speaking some English in the hall. And after 2 years, Ladun graduated. Her friends, smart, sensible, sophisticated, some college bound, some not, continued to be mostly of Tibetan ethnicity. Sometimes the boys and I went jogging together. Faster than me, they ran through the neighborhoods, past shady mansions and 3-car garages, professionally landscaped lawns. Suddenly, a patrol car would be following them. What could it mean that brown-skinned boys were running through an affluent neighborhood? I'd catch up with them, gasping for breath, and the patrol car would speed off, suddenly disinterested. Class, race, ethnicity. I began to experience Madison on multiple levels. One that was kind and inclusive, another that was meaner or more exclusive. One that welcomed diversity, another that regarded brown-skinned people with suspicion or fear, welcoming people of color only at certain events, preferably in costume and in small numbers. So I received in these years so many gifts from this family, and one of the first ones I realized was that for the first time I understood what my own grandparents, who had come from Poland, had gone through. They had arrived in 1920, and they too had become citizens, and they too had to decide which customs to keep and which to let go of. And they too were proud of their kids becoming fluent in the country's language. And they too lived to see their children marry. And this is a fun picture to look at while I read one other little blurb. So Tenzin and Mi'kmaq continued to work cleaning Kennedy Manor apartment building. Even as Mi'kmaq passed retirement age, their friendly smiles and steady presences as much a fixture as the shiny Otis elevators. The pair were punctual, always respectful, often cheerful, quick to laugh and to shrug off small slights. Others might have seen their work as menial, but I imagine Tenzin and Mi'kmaq could hear the words of the Dalai Lama echoing the halls as they swept. Quote, "I find hope in the darkest of days and focus in the brightest. I do not judge the universe." Each push of the vacuum cleaner was an expression of love for their children and grandchildren, the next generations who would stand tall on their shoulders. And the generations keep coming. You can have Nyma's kids peek in, and there are Mi'kmaq and Tenzin have now 6 grandchildren. Unlike my immigrant grandparents, though, the Tibetans in their diaspora are surrounded by a profound, amazing religion, Tibetan Buddhism. And right here in Madison, Wisconsin, we have Deer Park, one of the most beautiful of monasteries. And also surrounding them are the words and compassion and philosophy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, very much alive, very much present, with TV beamed in Tibetan to homes all around the diaspora, with his words and philosophy. This is Deer Park in the winter, and if it weren't COVID, and certainly after COVID, you are welcome to make arrangements for a tour and to see both inside and outside. It's truly spectacular and authentic. You could write a book just about it. And Nyima and I, if it weren't COVID, would love to invite you to Deer Park for what's happening this weekend in homes all over the world in the diaspora, Tibetan diaspora, which is Losar, or Tibetan New Year. And Nyima can tell you a little bit about it. This is the Buddhist altar in the home of my family, and you'll see Nyma's altar right in back of him, because he's going to now invite us into his home in Madison. So Nyima came here in 2016. He's going to tell his story, but suffice to say that he worked in the very prestigious Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama resides in Dharamsala. And we will let him get to his story, and then we'll have time for some questions and discussion. So I'm very honored to unshare my screen, and Nyima is going to tell us a little bit about himself and how he came to Madison in 2016, and almost anything else you want to know about. Nyima?
All right, thank you, Madeline, for the wonderful presentation. So I'm going to talk briefly about my story, then I might talk more during the question and answer session. So my name is Nyima Gyaltse, which means son. So I was born in Tibet, but very unfortunately, I could not spend many years with my parents as a very young age, around 9 or 10. I got separated from my family. Then I got escaped to India, where we have Tibetan government in exile. So I went to Tibetan Children's Village School there in Dharamsala in the northern India, because my parents were worried when I was Tibet. They think that the Chinese government systematically they are destroying our culture and language. So they indoctrinate young kids about the communism and their ideas. So they're systematically destroying Tibetan culture and language. So this is a big danger to the very survival for the Tibetan people. So my parents sacrificed and sent me to India to learn Tibetan language and culture and to preserve them and to pass to the next generation. So it was very fortunate to study Tibetan language and culture in India. Then after my college days, I worked in the library, Tibetan Works and Archive. There I worked like 8 years. And in the end of 2016, I came here and I'm living in Madison with my family here. I have 2 kids. Right now they are sleeping. So my wife is also with kids now. So this is a brief story of me. For the last 25 years, I have never seen my parents. I was not able to meet them. Only after coming here, I could communicate with them and see them through these social medias. Thank you. That's a brief story of me.
Thank you, Nyima. Nyima is for a powerful story, which is a book in itself. That was a very short and wonderful summary. And can everyone see my video now?
I can see your video.
Okay, wonderful. But that gives us an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we welcome them. I hope that Tenzin Namdal will peek in. Nyima is the husband, if you want to figure out, those of you who've read the book, where he fits in, is the husband of the sister of Lakpa, who married Namgyal, the oldest son. So Namgyal is the oldest son, and you saw that picture with all 4 kids married, all 4 people of Tibetan ethnicity. Namgyal married Lakpa, who was Tibetan Indian, and Tamdeen married Seton, who is Chicago Tibetan, and Tardo and Namgyal actually married cousins, both from India. And who does that leave? Ladun married a Tibetan Nepali. So those were the Ladun's marriage was my trip to Nepal with its many faux pas for those who've read the book. And yeah, many stories, but we'll take some questions. Ellen, do you want to pick some, or I don't know. There's also, I see that people can raise their hand. Is that correct?
Yes, and we do have one question from Rudy, is when was the beginning of this big exodus of Tibetans?
Nyima, do you want to say when did Tibetans begin leaving Tibet?
That was in the year 1959, like 60 years ago, when the communist China invaded Tibet, and the Dalai Lama and the government of Tibet escaped to India and settled there, exile government. So we have Tibetan refugee communities in India, different parts of the country. So we are preserving our culture. We have our school. We have our monasteries. Also, we practice farming. So it was like 60 years ago. Still, Tibetans are fighting for their freedom through non-violence. We are always thinking about we can go back to Tibet next year. But it's been now 60 years. Yeah, still our struggle is alive, very much alive.
Yes, and this exile and the Great Exodus took a long time. It wasn't just a week or a month. It took a year's, better part of a year, and people went up the mountain in the snow and then down the mountain in, for instance, Bhutan on the other side, in a radically different environment that was much more wet and tropical, and they'd seen insects for the first time in their life and got all kinds of tropical diseases. And yeah, it was a great struggle, considering the huge success that has followed. Nyima, I just had to look away for a minute. Did you tell the story of going over the Himalayas yourself when you were 9 years old?
Yeah, I clearly remember at that time, my parents sent me with some grown-up people. So we walked on our foot like 20 days in the winter freezing snows over the Himalayas. I thought we're gonna die there, but luckily we could reach in India and survive there and flourish.
And were you all alone? Did you have any sisters or brothers? These were just strangers, these adults you didn't even know?
Yeah, at that time, some grown-up people are there. So my parents know them and asked them, please take them to India and send them to school under the Dalai Lama's government, so they can do something for the Tibetan people, and in the near future, they can tell the world that the situation in Tibet is very tense. So, yeah, things like that.
We have some more questions. Nyima, are your parents still in Tibet? And how were you able to come to Madison?
Yeah, my parents are, my mom is still in Tibet. My dad passed away like a decade and a half years ago, long time back. So I have never seen him since I separated from my family. But my mom never told me that he passed away. She thought that I would be very sad if she tells my dad was passed away. So she kept it as a secret. But later I learned that my father was passed away a long time ago. So from India, I came to USA. Yeah.
And Nyima is because he's directly from Tibet, is not a refugee or an immigrant. He was an asylee, so he was able to ask for asylum, and the timing was such that he and his wife were granted asylum just weeks before President Trump was elected, where the asylum laws changed radically overnight. So always been very thankful that
Yeah.
that was a smooth arrival.
Yeah, lucky that I seek asylum here in USA before President Trump got into the office. So that was later last year of the President Barack Obama's presidency. So within a year, I got asylum here in United States. So I'm very happy about it.
Ellen, I'll read Rudy's comment here, who said, I think there's no way to empathize with a 9-year-old walking over the Himalayas with strangers. It's unbelievable and incomprehensible. When we meet you in the street, Nyima, we must remember to shake your hand. And so that's from Rudy Martinka. So thank you for that comment, Rudy. It is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And he had said that journey, in what year was it? Was it the 1960s?
You mean when I came from Tibet?
Yeah, well, no, when you came, that's right. When you came over
that was in the end of 1993.
And you said it was 20 days, even that. Mm-hmm. Okay, Ellen, I'll let you resume reading.
Let's see. We have a question here from Lori that says, thank you for this wonderful talk. And she has 2 questions. First, how is the Tibetan New Year celebrated? Are there specific foods or traditions? Is it also the year of the ox, like with the Chinese Lunar New Year? And second question, what can people in Wisconsin do to help our Tibetan community feel more welcomed?
Okay, Tibetan New Year. Nyima, that is yours. We're already in the process of cleaning for it, right?
Yeah. So actually, Tibetan New Year is a very long. Back in Tibet, I remember people celebrate like 15 days, but here we are living in a very different country. We don't have much time. So at least we celebrate for 3 days. So we follow the lunar calendar. Basically, back in Tibet, the people are farmers. So based on the movement of the moon and the stars, so we follow that lunar calendar. And so starting from tomorrow, New Year starts. So sometimes the Chinese New Year and the Tibetan New Year falls on the same day, sometimes falls on a different day. So New Year, we wear our traditional dress. Then on the first day, we go to our temple or monastery, do our prayers and greet each other. Then we gather and celebrate Tibetan dishes. Then meeting with our elders and gathers with our friends. So we sing and dance traditional songs and dance. We do traditional songs and dance. So it's a long process. At the same time, it's a kind of party for us. Yep. So this is really exciting.
That sounds lovely. And then is there anything that we as, Madisonians, McFarland residents, can we do anything specific to help welcome people to the community?
Oh, usually we do have gatherings. We also call our special guests from the city hall, especially those people who support Tibet. And, we have our friends and guests. But this year is very different. So I'm very sad about that. So we don't have mass gathering and we don't have special events. So hopefully, maybe in the next year, we can invite more people and we can celebrate together and share the joy and happiness together.
Yes, it's if the question was more generic in welcoming Tibetan people to Wisconsin and to America, I think the Tibetan people in the diasporas are well enough established. They've been welcoming many immigrants themselves and helping people during this pandemic and during all other crises. The Tibetan community is out on the front lines raising money for people and giving food to people. And they appreciate advocacy for the Tibetan cause. There are many opportunities to do that. And I'm going to end that sentence with "and." I lost a thought there.
So we have quite a few questions, actually. So another one from Teresa is, so there are still refugee camps in India. Where are the areas and what are they like?
Madeline, you gonna talk or
Sure, I showed a map with the dots on it, and there were 40 dots then and 70 dots now of Tibetan refugee settlements. These are not places on a desert with tents. These look more like cities. The Tibetan people have built their own houses and made fantastic cooperative shops and rug weaving and cooperative farms, and they have it brilliantly organized in units. It's a very impressive organization so it's like visiting a city. I compared one in Nepal a little bit, maybe more like visiting a wealthy Navajo reservation or something like that, like people of primarily one ethnicity, but just so much culture and so much good government and solar power and water power and a lot of good technologies. Impressive. I definitely, if you go to India or Nepal, definitely go out of your way to visit one of the communities. Do you want to add anything, Nyima? You lived in them.
Yeah, so there are over 1,000 over 150,000 Tibetans in India and Bhutan and Nepal. So we have our own communities from North India to South, from West to East. So in the community, we have our schools, our small factories. Also, this is run by the central government, which is based in Northern India. So this is called Tibetan Government in Exile. We also have elected political leaders. So every 5 years, we also cast our vote and elect our president. So this is one of the most successful refugee community in the world, mainly because we have so much support from the international communities and individuals. Still, we have refugee communities also in Europe, here in USA, also here in Madison, Wisconsin Tibetan Association, like that.
Wonderful. Another question that we have for Nyima, now that you have children of your own, does it change how you see your parents' decisions? It must have been so hard for them. And that question is from Lucy.
So you mean that my children can see my parents, or?
I think she means just that your parents must have had such a hard time making the decision to send you. Has your view of that or thoughts on that changed at all since you've had your own children?
Yeah, so I think it's my parents did a great sacrifice. Also, I lived most of the time behind the shadow of my family. It was really sad to live away from your family and parents, especially at the time you need care and love from your parents and from your family. So I become like a orphan or semi-orphan, lived in the orphanage. When I think about all these things, now I have 2 kids. Sometimes I think, oh, they are lucky kids. At least I become their parents and and they get the K, what they want. So I learned how it is difficult to live away from your parents at a very early age. So the lessons that I learned from my own story, so I really cherish my kids and share my maximum love and affection towards my two kids. Yep.
And really lively kids. And sometimes on Facebook, if you're a friend of Nyima's, you can see him teaching his son the Tibetan alphabet and to read. And his daughter Tritson learns anything that her older brother Laku learned. She's right there learning. She just skips the 2 years that are between them, which reminds me that Madison has a Saturday school of Tibetan language and culture with over 50 kids enrolled from age 6 to high school. And then they have gone on, there's a small cadre now at UW-Madison, and of course, kids at other colleges, but some teachers practically on their own time and little honorarium from Tibetan parents have done just an amazing job to keep alive the language in this social media, very cool, hip video game culture to go back. And I studied Tibetan, and the first words I learned were monk and pen and quill and vulture. And anyway, it was vocabulary out of another time and another world, but they've really done an amazing job of teaching kids. And Nyima is one of these parents also teaching their kids and keeping the culture that you can keep alive.
Wonderful. Another question, this one is for you, Madeline, from your cousin Margaret. How did you remember all the details of what happened during your trip to India as noted in your book?
Yeah, I was writing that, and I said, I think I wrote this somewhere, and I found this little tiny notebook where I had jotted down impressions from the window, and every once in a while the notes you take save you, and so that little notebook saved that chapter.
Excellent. And Martha asks, were you involved at the university with the organization of Madison Friends on International Students? How could the community provide more hospitality and friendship to international students and their families?
I think Madison Friends just does an amazing job, but I think, and I'm also now involved in Open Doors for Refugees, and sometimes we as Americans, one of our great strengths is we form these nonprofit groups, but one of our weaknesses, we kind of want to do it as a group or want to join a group. I think what happened with me with Tenzin Kelsang is I just said hello to someone. And I think the power of just reaching out to someone can't be underestimated, and friendships can really grow from there, because I think we all are so interested in our neighbor's foods, and we wish our neighbor would just drop off some food for us, especially in the COVID, or our neighbors' birthday parties, or our neighbor's celebration, but we're so shy. And I think especially with another culture, we feel so shy that we're going to somehow do harm or stick our foot in our mouth or say the wrong thing or be stupid. And we can be all of those things, but the people in other cultures have so much more experience than us, than we do from them, that I think we just need to realize that kind of making a fool of ourselves sometimes is the price that we pay for these beautiful gifts that come from just knocking on the door or saying hello or making a friend with a child. And then because you're a friend with a child, you become a friend with the adult. So that's what I really want to emphasize.
Thank you. Mickey asks, thanks for sharing your experience. I'm wondering, what is the most difficult issue to adapt to in the US life? She says, when I met Hmong people in Wisconsin in the 90s, they seemed to have difficulties for language and cultural issues.
Nyima, this is a good one too. Is Tenzin Namdal, is she still upstairs, or We could pull her in for this too, what she's found most difficult to adapt to. But what have you found most difficult to adapt to in life since you came to the United States?
Yeah, coming into a new country, it's really difficult first to know the systems. Also, what kind of food is tastes better, or how to deal with people. So for me, most of my life I spent away from home. India, first when I get there, same thing, surrounded by all the strangers, slowly we talk to each other and become friends, and we share the joy. Then I went also South India for my further studies. I was the only Tibetan in college, so I really, miss my friends and family. Then later I came here in USA. Before, it was kind of strange environment, where you have to take care about your family and yourself. So the environment is new. Slowly, I talk to people. I've met new people and met friends. So such as you are one of them, Madeline. So you really opened the eyes and supported us very much. So I feel thank you for that. In your book, one of the quotations I can still remember: "There are no strangers here, but friends yet to meet." So
Friends you haven't met, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't met. So basically, humans, all the human beings are same, So deep down, everybody needs love and care, and we need to talk to each other and live side by side. So slowly, I'm learning the system in this country and new things. So yeah, there are a lot of challenging things here, but I'm learning still. Yep.
Thank you. Father asks, what is the staple food of Tibet, and what was your greatest obstacle in the US?
Oh, the most stable food in Tibet when I was there is roasted tamba. Tamba is a roasted barley. It grows in the high altitude. Tibet is very in the highland. People call it the roof of the world. Where there is less oxygen. So to survive in such a high altitude, tamba is the best and the most stable food for most of the Tibetans. But after I left, things changed, and still the elder people, they enjoyed samba.
Yeah, and I'll say it's an acquired taste. He said the food from the roof of the world, barley, if you bought it in the Willie Street Co-op, right? Well, they roast it, so that makes it a little bit better. Then they can mix it with water and tea. Well, that gives it, more like oatmeal or something. But yeah, I'll admire Tibetan culture a little bit more before sampa is my favorite.
Yeah, but then people also eat a lot of dry yak meat.
Dried yak cheese, kind of like, right? That you gnaw on, it can break your teeth. But Tenzin Kelsang will chew on it all day long while she's working at her jobs, and it's just kind of a chewing gum that never ends.
Right. That's right.
Thank you. Jane has a question. She says, I very much enjoyed the book and learning about Tibet. I think you said that when you were enrolling the children in school, you were surprised that some of the DPI curriculum work didn't seem to be working in the actual school. And she'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Well, that could be a long discussion. So when I was working at DPI, we were working on the standards, which is kind of a lofty, ideal thing that guides the curriculum. But the kids at school, I just had so much admiration for the ESL teachers, because until I met English as a second language teachers, I didn't understand how it could work, how you could take kids who were so far behind in the curriculum and somehow graduate them on age. And the 4 kids in our family spent a lot of time in ESL teachers, and these ESL teachers were just fabulous, and they really made the kids' cultures and their names and the issues of their countries into the curriculum of history and language arts and science. And they were really brilliant teachers. They can't do everything, though. There were, for instance, learning disabilities or special eds needs or mental health needs that, we expect teachers to do all things. And in this one class, they couldn't all do one things. I think what I was talking about in that, though, was just that our work at the DPI seemed so lofty compared to the needs of the kids, which was just to understand such basic things and to become better readers and to have things to read that were, who was writing about adolescent Tibetan kids? I mean, even being mistaken as, Hispanic kids or Hmong kids. I mean, that was fine, but it's hard to get stories that help kids connect. Anyway, teachers did a fabulous job.
Thank you. We have, I think, about 3 more questions as we're approaching 8 o'clock. So Rudy asks for Madeline, he says, your name sounds Polish. Do you have Polish history, and has that maybe colored your view?
Yeah, it's a good guess, Rudy. It's Czech, on the Czech-Polish border. And I think what I didn't learn from my grandfather, I could have learned everything from my own grandfather that I learned from Mi'kmaq. I could have learned about the culture and the gender differences. And I think that most kids who are first and second generation in our American culture just throw away their immigrant past until it's too late, and in a deep way. But it did give me the gift of all the interest that I've had since then. I just think that I'm one of many people who didn't delve deeply enough into, the previous generations. My cousin Marty is on this call from Massachusetts, and she's another Uraneck. So yeah, all of us Americans, especially those that came from European past, have a lot that we can learn, and that the empathy and the passion for cultures that we can extend to all of the cultures of people coming just down the neighborhood and over the border.
Thank you. This question is from Nyima, from Marianne. Do you know why your parents were unable to leave with you?
The thing is, they sent me to India, and I crossed the Himalayas. So I was not able to go back to Tibet for a long time. This is because Chinese invasion of Tibet. So in a way, China do not give visa to the Tibetans to visit me in India. So I cannot go back to Tibet because I already escaped from Tibet. So the local authorities always asking my parents about me. So they always give some pressure and trouble, asking them, where's your son? Bring him back. So at the beginning, a lot of troubles there. So after some time, my parents told them my son was died in India. So after that, they didn't ask them questions and don't give them troubles. So yeah, this is not only me, there are like me, there are a lot of other hundreds of Tibetan kids who came from Tibet to India, and they cannot go back to their home and meet their parents. So we are taking care by the international community and our government in exile in India. So because of that condition, we cannot meet and see each other.
And you went to the Tibetan Children's School, and one of the Tibetan Children's Schools are essentially these orphans. Their parents live in Tibet, but they have been separated from them and never expect to see them again. And they grow up to be strong, resilient, smart kids. And they are sponsored. And I saw something on the Wisconsin Tibetan Association Facebook page the other day where they were complimenting a young person who was 18 years old or 20 years old and was sponsoring one of these kids. You pay like $400 for a semester, about something like this. And so a lot of people in the Tibetan community do sponsor these kids so that they can basically have tuition and basic needs. But I like the comment if someone said, your mother raised you well, because this young person of 18 was donating to the Tibetan Children's School. But that's where you went, Nyima, right?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, the Tibetan Children's Village School is school is funded by the SOS. That it's one of the SOS community. They're funding the school for a long time. Still, different communities and individuals all over the world, they are donating for the kids' school and tuition and food and everything. Right.
Nyima, did you have grandparents at home when your parents didn't leave with you? Of course, by then it was much, much more dangerous to escape than people who just left immediately in 1959. But were there grandparents or were there siblings?
Oh,
sisters and brothers?
I have, you mean back in Tibet?
Back in Tibet.
Yeah, I have my grandparents, and at that time I was very young, and I have very short memory, fainted memory about my grandparents. Now they all passed away. What I have is all the pictures and some memories.
Mm-hmm. So your parents had a lot of ties to the community. Okay, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Okay, I think if you're all right with it, we have two last questions. Nyima, you mentioned that your mother and you communicate via social media, and this question is from Joel. Is there something you do often, or are there any restrictions with the Chinese government might place on that?
Yeah, when I was in India, there's always a restriction when I communicate with my parents, because they know that, that my parents already told that I was gone a long time back. So if I talk to my parents, it's a trouble for them. So I usually communicate with my parents through WeChat. So India already recently, they banned this app, which is very easier for people to talk and to share the things. But now USA is talking about banning this WeChat app. So I was a little bit worried. Oh, then how I gonna keep communicating with my parents if the USA government banned the app? But still, I'm trying to find other means of communication to keep in touch with my parents.
Mm-hmm. The world is so connected. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then this, I think, will be our last question since it's after 8, but Margaret asks, are you able to find yak meat in Madison? Do you also make the plain meal with barley flour and water? She's a little, yes. So are you able to find yak meat, and are you able to make that plain barley flour and water meal.
Yeah, that Madeline Tenzin Kesa, she during the weekend she makes that barley jumper from the barley. So I think it's really hard to get yak meat here in Madison. So far, I couldn't find any yak meat here in Madison, but I can get jumper from Tenzin Kesa.
I thought I'd show a picture of Tritson and Laku. These are Nyma's children who are in bed. They didn't get to stay up at late, such good parents. And I will say that I'm happy to write globalmaddie@gmail.com. Happy to write to anyone, and I'll be happy to share Nyma's address also. The Wisconsin Tibetan Association has been a great supporter of the book and presentations, and whenever we do get a little honorarium, it goes toward the Tibetan Association, which then gives it to the Saturday School for Culture. But thank you all so much for reading the book. Anyone who does a book review on Goodreads or on Amazon, you couldn't believe until you become an author yourself how hard it is to get a review. So since some of you have actually read it, we will appreciate that. I want to thank Nyima so much. Such a pleasure to have you as a co-presenter, and please tell Tenzin Namdal that I can feel her presence, and thank you for her support. And thank you to everyone. We didn't get to see your picture because it's not on Zoom, but the library in McFarland, we're both so honored to present. So thank you to all the cousins and sisters and Peace Corps returnees and friends who dropped by for this cold evening. We really appreciate it.
And Anne from the library again, just popping on to say thank you, Madeline and Nyima. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, very powerful personal stories. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. We really appreciate it. Even if I called you Ellen, I'm sure at least more than once.
Oh,
thank you, everyone. Can you say thank you in Tibetan, Nyima, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Okay, thank you. Tukjiche in Tibetan, Tukjiche.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, you have a good night. Thank you, Madeline.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night.